A swarm of earthquakes has been rattling the slopes of a dormant volcano in the middle of the night. A volcano that hasn't erupted in over 700 years. And they're not small quakes either. There were some that reached a magnitude of 4.2 and even 4.9. But the strange thing is that although there are tens of thousands of earthquakes every single day around the world, these ones seem to have barely made any real impact at all. There was no major damage, no serious injuries, and certainly no eruption. So what was all that shaking about? Was it an unusually quiet volcanic eruption? Or could something bigger be coming? It happened on the flanks or sides of Mount Ibu, which lies off the coast of the Indonesian island of Sumatra. The volcano had been rumbling and showing other signs of unrest for quite some time. Scientists had noticed increased levels of sulfur dioxide gas spewing from its summit crater. And when it comes to volcanoes, gas emissions are often one of the first hints that something is going on below the surface. They can increase before an eruption, because gas is one of the things that lowers the viscosity or thickness of magma. As it bubbles out of the magma, the pressure support keeping it underground is reduced, and it becomes easier for the rest of the magma to follow along with it. So scientists started keeping a close eye on the volcano, and then the earthquakes started. They began in early November and continued into December. Luckily, local officials had already issued a warning about potential unrest at the volcano and had advised people living nearby to be prepared to evacuate if necessary. That may have helped to reduce the impact of the quakes, because if everybody is expecting something big to happen and you need to leave your home anyway, it makes sense to leave a little earlier rather than later. It's just not clear exactly why this particular volcano had been chosen for extra monitoring. After all, while it does tower more than 3,700 meters above sea level and has the capacity to produce large explosive eruptions, it hasn't done so in over 700 years. It might have been selected for study simply because it's potentially dangerous. With a population of around 3 million people living less than 30 kilometers away on the island of Sumatra, another reason could be that the last major eruption happened right after Krakatoa blew up. That famous eruption in 1883, which is considered to be one of the deadliest in history, took place on the neighboring island of Krakatoa. The resulting tsunami is estimated to have killed more than 36,000 people on nearby islands, including Sumatra, and it was so loud that people more than 2,000 kilometers away in Australia heard it. Although Mount Ibu and Krakatoa are different volcanoes, they both sit on the same fault line known as the Sunda Megathrust Fault. So it's reasonable to assume that whatever caused Krakatoa to blow could also pose a threat to Mount Ibu. But even so, it still doesn't explain why there were earthquakes instead of, say, lava fountains or fire. Well, it turns out that the two are actually related. The quakes are a kind of visible evidence for what's happening beneath the surface. They're generated by the movement of magma through the rocks around it. As the magma pushes against the surrounding rock, it creates stress which builds up until it's finally released in a sudden jolt. That's an earthquake. The reason they tend to happen at night is just a coincidence. It's just that people are usually sleeping, so they're more likely to notice them when it happens at night. What's weird about the quakes associated with Mount Ibu is that they were mostly pretty small, reaching only a magnitude of 4. 2 at most. Usually when a volcano starts acting restless, the earthquakes associated with it are much bigger. Magma chambers tend to be filled with highly viscous magma, and so the quakes that do occur are usually pretty deep and fairly large. But that's not what happened here. And the reason isn't entirely clear. It could be that the magma chamber under Mount Ibu has filled up with less viscous magma, meaning that even though it's full, the quakes aren't particularly large. Alternatively, the magma itself could have been slowly seeping through cracks in the rocks without forming a proper magma chamber. There's another possibility too. Some volcanoes don't generate their own earthquakes. Instead, their unrest is registered as increased activity along nearby active faults, which means that the magma must be exerting enough force to affect the nearby tectonics. Faults slip and produce earthquakes whenever the stress they're feeling exceeds their strength. The magma pushing against the fault causes the stress to rise, but the rocks themselves are strong enough to resist the force. However, when the pressure is released, the stress drops suddenly, and the rocks can't regain their strength quickly enough to hold the fault in place. It slips, and the stress is released in an earthquake. This is basically what happened at Mount Unzen in Japan in 2009, when an earthquake swarm lasting several weeks preceded an eruption. But whatever the reason for the smaller quakes, they still indicate that there is magma moving under the volcano. So, is something coming? Well, not necessarily. While earthquakes are generally good indicators of unrest, they're not foolproof. We know that the magma is there because we can feel it and sometimes see it. But that doesn't automatically mean that it's going to erupt. The magma may just be circulating in a magma chamber like a pot of water on a stove. If the heat source is turned down, the water may stop boiling, but it doesn't necessarily spill out of the pot. Likewise, the magma may be cooling and become less buoyant, in which case it will stop rising and everything returns to normal. On the other hand, if the magma continues to rise, it will eventually break through the surface. So it's important to keep watching and waiting. To get a clearer idea of what's happening beneath the surface, scientists want to put some instruments down there. The problem is getting access to the volcano. Because it sits offshore, the only way to reach it is by boat. And Indonesia's Center for Volcanology and Geological Hazard Mitigation has requested funding to get there. Hopefully that'll be approved soon. And in the meantime, locals can rest easy, knowing that the biggest recent eruptions of Mount Ibu happened around 5,000 years ago. So even if the worst does happen, it shouldn't be quite as dramatic as Krakatoa. Earthquakes are fascinating, scary and beautiful, all at the same time. And if you'd like to learn more about how they work, you should check out Brilliant's course on the topic. Brilliant is an online learning platform with courses in science, computer science and math. Their courses make learning really fun and engaging with interactive modules that get you to apply the concepts you're learning about right away. I've been digging the probability course recently, which is useful not just for understanding statistics, but for decision-making in general. I'm also working on my everyday math skills. You never know when you might need to calculate the area of a circle or the volume of a cone. Thanks for watching.